Hello friends, got something a little bit different for you today. Today is my father's 90th birthday. I'm going to ask him about what he remembers from growing up. Stick around. Happy birthday, Dad. You're 90 years old. How does it feel to be 90?
You never thought I would make it, but I feel fairly well.
Well, I know you seem to get around better than a lot of people that's 20 years younger than you are.
Well, it's hard to compare with other people, but I have a running joke with a good friend of mine that says he used to could do 8 or 10 hours work, now I can do 2. I said I'm a 2-hour person now.
I wanted to ask you about, what do you remember? Well, what is the earliest thing that you remember from growing up?
I guess a couple of the earlier things was when we lived at the Bennett places, when Bennett farm, when my dad and mom was sharecropping. I remember going to the hog pen that was in Mr. Bennett's pasture and getting chased by his bull, and I was about 4 at the time. And then I remember when both my brothers were born. Remember on July the 4th, 1939, I was 5 at the time, and Daddy came and held Doyle up when he was just a few minutes old, when the doctor was there with the birth at home, and me and my sister was playing out in the yard. But so I guess some things stand out more than others, you know, at 4 and 5. But when I was about 3, I do remember that one. I got a tricycle for Christmas. Santa Claus had brought it, and that's when I guess I was 3 at that time, that Christmas. And the fact was that I recognized that as being a used tricycle. That found out later that a cousin had given that to Mom and Daddy for me for Christmas.
So if you were 3, 34, 35, that would have been right about the height of the Depression, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it actually started in 29, but then the banks started all closing up, and really the hard times came in 33.
Right.
So that would have been the year before I was born. So by the time I was 3, it would have been 37, and that was deep in the Depression then.
Your generation is really the last that remembers not having indoor plumbing or electricity. Of course, I know people in the city had it then, but people in the country didn't have it. What do you remember about that?
Well, I would think about that when, on the rare occasions that we got to go into town with Mom and Daddy to do a little shopping, or maybe to pay taxes or whatever. And we'd go to the rare bathrooms, and the only one that we knew of in town that was public, that Mama could take us to, was a bathroom at the J.C. Penney store, and that was a marvel to us, you know, that they had electric lights in the stores, and the fact that they had bathrooms that you could turn on faucets and turn them off. Of course, at school we knew about running water because they had built a new school that me and my sister started. She started the first year of the new school, and I started the second year. And when they finally came through with the electric power, it was the Rural Electrification, REA program that the government was helping sponsor. And they set up electric co-ops all the way around the United States in different areas to build power lines. But living in a rented house, the person that owned the farm and the house didn't see fit to wire our house.
So when did your family get power and indoor plumbing?
When Daddy figured that he had to get a job where he could get some cash money and not depend on seasonal work, like working at the cotton gin and the sawmill and the wheat threshing crew that he'd follow every summer. Said, and I can get you a job with a company called Martin Feed and Poultry, and said they're needing feed truck drivers really bad. So Daddy went and applied for the job, and they wanted him to start working that day. And Daddy rented a place that was within a short driving distance, so he could get to work and back. And not having a car, he got the company to let him drive the feed truck home every night, and we used it as our weekend transportation. So that was in 1942, and then Dean was born in 1943. That's the first place we had electricity, and still didn't have any water in the house. We just had a well outside where you had to draw water in it with a bucket. And of course, we didn't have any cooling way to cool foods or milk or anything. And even when we got electric power, we still had to, in the summertime, we had to let our milk and butter down in the well, in the well bucket, until we had to draw some more water for use, and to keep it from melting in the hot summertime weather that we had in that part of Georgia.
Now, I guess at some point you had an ice box.
At near the end of World War II, I guess in probably 44 or 45, Daddy was able to get an ice box, and they already had a company running an ice delivery route. So they came with big blocks of ice to put in that ice box twice a week. And I marveled that the guy that was delivering ice, every time he came, he'd come in with the ice tongs with a big block of ice and put it in the ice box. Mama had to have space for it to sit down in the ice box. It was a chest type. And we thought that was a real step ahead. It was, so we could keep milk and butter and leftover foods and stuff like that in the ice box.
Hearing about the Japanese bombing Pearl Harbor.
Oh yes, we didn't have any communications at home, no magazines, no newspapers, just everything by word of mouth. And Daddy was working, that was in the wintertime of course, on December the 7th of 1941, and we didn't hear about it that day, but Daddy went to the cotton gin and worked the next day, and at the end of the day he came rushing home and said the Japanese have bombed Pearl Harbor, and he said, we heard late today that the President and Congress has declared war on Japan in retaliation for bombing Pearl Harbor.
What is the first car that you remember your family having?
I don't know just when Daddy bought that car, but it was a 1929 Ford Roadster, and it had a fabric top that you could make a convertible out of it, and had a rumble seat where you could haul additional passengers besides a couple of adults in the front seat. And he didn't buy it new, but I don't know exactly when he got it, but I do remember when he had it, because my sister and I, Norma, always wanted to ride in that rumble seat that you could open up, like a trunk on behind the cab, so to speak. But Mama never would let us ride back there. She'd let us sit in there once in a while, but she never would let us ride back there because she was afraid we'd stand up and fall out. So he kept that one until Dora and came along, and by that time my sister and I were both getting bigger, and we just couldn't fit in that car, so he had to sell it and then go looking for a two-seater, and he bought a 1930 Model A and kept it several years.
What was the first car that you remember driving?
Well, I started when I'd make trips with Daddy delivering chicken feed. When we were on some country dirt roads, he'd let me drive the feed truck. So the first car I drove, I was almost 17 before I could get my driver's license, because we didn't have a car at that time for me to take the driving test in. So I was just from May till June before I was going to be 17 when Daddy bought that 42 Chevrolet Fleetline, they called it.
But you were driving the feed truck before that.
Oh yeah, and I had to learn on learn to drive and steer and shift the gears and all that with that feed truck, and it was a 4-speed.
Well, what do you remember about during the World War II?
We would, of course, not having any radio or any communications other than by word of mouth from other people. But we would get periodic reports, and of course I'd be all ears listening as I learned what a Pearl Harbor was, and that the U.S. was bent on putting Japan out of the war business, and so everything was going to the war effort.
I guess you remember about rationing.
Oh, there was a lot of things that you just could not buy. Leather goods was all going to the war effort to supply the soldiers with shoes and boots and that sort of thing. But you couldn't buy leather goods, and to start with, but then you could go to the rationing office and apply for a permit to buy 1 pair of shoes per family member per year, and you had to take that to the shoe store before they would sell you a pair of shoes for any member of the family. And I think each person was sent by mail a permit allowing you to buy 10 gallons of gas a month. then the next month they'd send you another mailing out with the coupons to get $10, not 10 gallons, not $10, but 10 gallons of gas. And I don't have any idea what gas prices was at that time. But lard was rationed, sugar was rationed, and I don't think coffee was actually rationed, but you just couldn't find it.
What is the first public job that you had?
Now, I started helping my Uncle Henry, and my sister did too, in the summertime picking cotton.
Oh, okay.
When I guess I was about 12 at the time, because I was 10 at the time, because it was in 1944, and I remember one day I picked 87 pounds of cotton at making 2 cents a pound. That's the first cash money I'd ever made.
Your father, was he trying to work a job and do farming?
He tried that for 1 year after we moved to the J place, which was in Hall County, the same one where we first got any electric power in the house. And more about that one, just briefly. There was what they called a drop cord. A cord was coming down from the ceiling and had a light bulb socket on it in the 4 rooms of that house. And we had one electrical outlet, and Dad was able to get an electric clock somewhere, and it had the face of the United States at that time. The continental United States was on the face of that clock, and that was amusing to me, to see that clock going around that with the face of the United States on that clock. But that was the only electrical appliance we had.
So you had power, but you didn't have anything to run off of power.
That's right, and you couldn't buy anything because there wasn't anything available. This may have been before the war started. It was sometime around 1940 that a large truck and another truck with a crew of men on it came, and they were stopping at each house as they passed on our road, and looking to see what kind of outhouse facilities you had. And some people had better facilities than others. And, when that truck loaded with prefab outhouses, and it was a metal structure and had a vent pipe going out the top of the roof to vent it from the pit that they would dig down and set the prefab factory-built outhouse on top of it. But when they got to our house, and we had seen them down the road the day before, when they were digging the pit and putting the factory-built outhouse over the top of that pit. And we knew that they were going to be coming on up the road. So when they came up the road and pulled into our yard, a couple of men went and looked to see what kind of facility we had, and they thought ours passed, so they got back in their truck and went on.
I know you went to a military college. Tell me about that.
Yet, North Georgia College was one of 7 essentially military schools in the whole United States. They got government assistance to help pay their college expenses, and I guess that's the only way I would have made it to college, you know, was getting my uniforms furnished and getting a subsistence check each month to help me through my school expenses, because it couldn't hold a job at a full-time school.
Part of the deal is you're obligated to serve in sometime after that, right?
You are. If you can make a high enough score to be accepted as a commissioned lieutenant in the Army, and some didn't score high enough even after their third year in school. But I did, and then I got a commission on June the 3rd, 1957. And we have a picture here of Mama pinning my lieutenant bar on my shirt collar. I went and took basic training at Fort Benning, Georgia, and that was in the summer of '55, which was the same training that regular military draftees and people that were joining were getting.
Well, over 90 years, what's some other things that kind of stand out that you can remember?
But of course, there's been many things, and one of the things that would be alien to today's generation, but I remember the first time I ever drove a car with automatic transmission, and I was working in the feed store at Martin Feed and Poultry Company, the same company Daddy had gone to work for in 1942. And this was in 1950. And I was working in the feed store, and no, it was 51, because she had a new 51 Chevrolet, the lady that her and her husband owned the company. And she came out and handed me a bank bag, and she said, "Go make this bank deposit for me." And she handed me her car keys, and I had never even been in a car that had a automatic transmission. And then on Chevrolet, it was called a Power Glide, and it was a 2-speed automatic. It'd start off in low, and then automatically shift to the high gear. So I did all right. I had read in magazines, you know, how you go about starting up and putting it in neutral and or park and that sort of thing. But when I started uptown, when I started getting into traffic lights, I'd about stomp the floor out of her new car trying to find the clutch, and there wasn't no clutch pedal.
Right.
With the automatic transmission.
I guess you remember well, like when Kennedy was assassinated.
Oh yeah, I was working in the credit department of a Sears store in Asheville, North Carolina at that time, and somebody had heard it on the TV that had set up out in the TV department of the Sears store, and came rushing back and told us President Kennedy has been shot and killed in Dallas, Texas.
I guess some of the other major events, I guess you remember well when they first went to the moon.
Oh, you know, just about everything stopped at the time that they were scheduled to make their moon landing. And I don't guess there's hardly a person in the United States that was working at those particular moments, because everybody was trying to be in front of a TV screen somewhere to get whatever they were going to show with the astronauts landing on the moon.
Happy birthday, Dad.
Well, thank you.
Appreciate you watching. Till next time, so long.